How dare you be you? I had been called into the office of Mr. Harold Patz at Northland Baptist Bible College, where I was told that my haircut didn't meet the appearance standards for a Christ-like woman. I left and never went back. I was one of two girls born into a white, Midwestern, evangelical Christian family. I didn't really like hanging out with Mom because I didn't like doing girl things. I didn't like housework or cooking. I liked hanging out with Dad. I enjoyed doing Dad stuff. I loved being outside. And Dad was always fixing things like the car or the tractor or the well pump. But I began to realize that something was off because when I was away from home, I was being asked, "Are you a girl or are you a boy?" And that confounded me because when I was at home, I could just be me. But when I was away from home, I didn't fit into the required distinction between a girl and a boy. I remember standing in the foyer of our church one day, I think I was about 6 or 7 years old, and someone asked me that question that adults ask you when you're little. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I proudly announced, I want a sex change. I've thought back on that so many times, I don't even remember how I knew what a sex change was. But what I did know was, I didn't want to be a girl. I wanted to be a boy because boys had more freedoms than girls. For me, being a girl meant I had to do things that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to wear makeup. I didn't want to wear fingernail polish. I certainly didn't want to wear high heels. And why would I want to wear a dress? I had zero romantic interest in boys. None. I was happy in my tomboyness because I could be who I was in my independence. I could just be Rach. I found my greatest connection with pets and having a dog. Going out to the barn, swinging on the rope swing, climbing around in the hayloft, jumping from the hayloft down onto the roof of an old station wagon eternally parked in the barn. The dog was always there with me. We'd go down to the creek where I'd find garter snakes, catch a couple garter snakes, bring them home, race them on the front porch. I discovered fishing. Fishing was very therapeutic for me and easy to enjoy. And yet, over time, I realized girls didn't do these things. Gradually, I was ostracized because I liked doing boy things. I didn't fit in with the girls at school because I didn't care about makeup or purses. The choice here wasn't much of a choice. The alternative of conforming and changing who I was in order to fit in felt way more uncomfortable for me than being ostracized for doing things that brought my heart joy. The dog didn't care that I was catching snakes. The dog didn't care that I was fishing. The dog didn't care that I was exploring the creek. In fact, the dog loved those things too. This became a problem anytime I went out into public, away from the sanctuary I found playing in the barn or exploring the creek near my house. I felt the disconnect most intensely when people began to question my gender outright. Sometimes, my sister and I got to spend the weekend at Grandma and Grandpa Dickson's house. They lived in town. We lived in the country. We didn't have very many close neighbors, and there weren't other kids around for us to play with, but there were other kids that lived in the neighborhood that Grandma and Grandpa lived in. One day, when I was about 8 years old, a couple of boys my age came around, and we started playing together. One of them asked me point blank, "Are you a boy or are you a girl?" This was the first time I was ever asked this question. And suddenly I realized I could answer this however I wanted. So I stood tall, puffed my chest out and said, "I'm a boy." And the other boy said, "We want to see." And I said, "You don't have to see. I'm telling you, I'm a boy." They accepted my answer, and that was that. I felt so liberated, like a huge burden had been lifted for those few hours that I got to be a boy. The reality was that because I had a female body, I had to do female things that I didn't want to do. This became problematic because my family was staunchly Christian. And being a Christian female meant submitting to a whole set of standards and rules and requirements that Christian girls were expected to follow. One of those requirements was modesty. And inherent within the concept of modesty was that because you're a woman, you'll likely be preyed upon by men simply because you have a female body. So one of the responsibilities that Christian women were assigned was, it's your job to protect yourself from men and not tempt them by dressing provocatively. If you dress modestly, you are less likely to cause men to stumble. I didn't believe it was my job to keep men from stumbling. They own that, not me. But yet, I still had to wear skirts and dresses to church and to school. Skirt wearing imposed limitations to me that didn't feel very good at all. For example, if you were going to swing at the school or church playground, one of the most fun things to do is to swing as high as you could and then jump off. I could easily fly 8 to 10 feet into the air. But when I flew up into the air, my skirt flew up into the air too. And I suffered the resulting embarrassment. The skirt mandate left me with the choice of either forfeiting activities that brought me joy or adapting somehow. The simplest solution was to wear shorts under my skirt. Problem solved. But I couldn't understand why the absurdity of this was not obvious to everyone else. What difference did it make for us as kids who happened to be girls whether or not we wore skirts or pants? Because if we're not supposed to be sexualized to begin with, then why impose gender norms dictating what we have to wear? Why don't we all just wear pants and then it won't matter? Or are you trying to groom us for gender-specific roles that you think we're supposed to have as Christian women, which is to become wives and bear children? This was nothing I wanted any part of. But what choice did I have? I was being raised within a Christian family. I argued long and hard with my mom on a Sunday morning about wearing a skirt to church. But I inevitably left the house with my head down and my skirt on. Yet I was never required to wear a skirt at home. Only when I went to church or to our Christian school. Which raised an interesting question. Why does God care if I wear a skirt to church? I couldn't understand the disconnect between authenticity and requirement. Dress wearing felt like nothing more than an unjustified requirement to me, a rule without a reason. By my college years, I was a natural athlete, and playing sports became my outlet. While enrolled at Northland Baptist Bible College, I played both sports that were offered for women, volleyball and basketball. The summer of my sophomore year, I was invited to join the traveling volleyball clinic team as a clinician. And I had a very short haircut. And I was pulled aside prior to leaving for our first week of volleyball camps. I was warned that my haircut was pushing the line regarding the appropriate appearance for women to be Christ-like representatives of the school. After 3 weeks of travel, we returned to campus where I promptly arranged for another haircut because a perm on the top, shaved on the side, grows out pretty quickly. Within 24 hours, I was called into the school administrator's office where I was told that I was no longer going to be allowed to represent the school because I wasn't adhering to the wholesome Christ-like appearance for women that the school wanted me to exemplify. I was told that I had to leave as soon as possible. This experience created an extraordinary turning point in my life. I had already witnessed an enormous amount of unreasonable pettiness by Christians. But this dramatically changed my trajectory because leaving this college required me to pivot. By this time, I had experienced 20 years of upbringing with Christian family values, Bible interpretation, and countless hours of preaching and indoctrination about how to be more Christ-like. And it was at this turning point when I began to realize that within this construct, to live a life worthy of God's love meant obeying a long list of stringent rules and meeting impossible standards. There was a very positive turning point here as well, though, because this confirmed for me that my own internal guidance system and church doctrine were on a collision course. This unlocked a path for me to search for and find real answers regarding the juxtaposition between inner truth versus external dogma. The do what you're told because our interpretation of the Bible says so versus our individual connection to the truths that lay deep within our souls. Our own inner guidance system designed to give us direction and keep us safe from harm. So, I transferred to Tennessee Temple University, a more progressive Bible college that allowed more latitude to ask questions and explore more personal freedoms within the faith. And they had an Army ROTC program. Thankfully, I managed to avoid anything to do with being gay during my college years. But that anonymity began to erode in my mid-20s when my church-going peers started asking me if I was gay. I was confused and unsettled by this question because I had never had a girlfriend. I had never kissed a girl. I had never even held a girl's hand. What the hell was I doing to be suspected of being gay? This sent me on yet another trajectory of self-discovery and deep soul-searching around the question, what are you, Rachel? And can you be gay without ever having done anything gay? As you can imagine, I was deeply troubled by these questions because I had molded my life around the requirements of the faith. And now this faith was questioning who I was. By now, I'd experienced an excessive amount of conditional love. Up to this point, that sense of belonging and acceptance I was so desperately seeking had been contaminated with a counterfeit version of belonging. Do this, and you'll receive this reward. Don't do that, or you'll receive that punishment. All were examples of conditional love. I was very familiar with love based on earned credits. Follow the rules, reward. Do what you're told, reward. Don't cross the line, reward. But the moment you chose to be you, bam, judgment, shaming, criticism, and ridicule followed. I didn't believe this was Jesus' message. And so I pled with him. I basically demanded that he show me an example of what his message was about. Unconditional love. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. 1 week later, I met my first girlfriend. And for the first time in my life, I experienced what it meant to be loved for being me, just as I was. This is when I began to realize that my truth was more valuable than any false bravado. No fake reward system could touch the genuineness I felt, being seen for who I was and loved for it. And furthermore, the overwhelming relief that came when I relaxed into the peace and calm of welcoming myself home to myself. Religious trauma is real on both sides of the equation. Not only for gays who are entangled in the impossible dilemma of either or, but also for those within the church who experience this from the other side. Devotees who secretly oppose the injustices that were done, like outcasting, conversion therapy, and excommunication. But for their own protection, they felt compelled to remain silent because they too had to choose faith over friends and family. To speak out automatically meant they were complicit, guilt by association. So where do we go from here? Reconnecting to your true self is its own journey. It's a long, arduous path that takes time. It takes real courage to live again from within the whole of your authentic self, piece by piece, reclaiming all the forsaken parts of yourself. The first step in reclaiming these parts is to talk about it. Acclaimed author Brené Brown said, "You own your story. You get to write the ending. Then you talk about it so shame can't hold on. When people see and hear you talking about it, it gives them permission to talk about it. Shame can't hold on to being spoken to. So your courage to talk about that deflates shame. It's like filtering poison out of water because you've got the courage to speak up." The next step requires you to get reacquainted with those parts of yourself that you hid away because the evidence around you said, for one reason or another, to express these threatened your security. It means recalling the very things that brought you joy and accepting that you are enough exactly as you are right now. That you don't have to conform and you no longer have to disregard anything that your inner knower wants to express, be it how you cut your hair, whether you prefer to be outdoors, whatever it is that makes your heart sing. The people-pleasing part of you can be released because believing in your inner compass as the most important guide in your life will set you free. Instead, surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you walk in a room. The system demands that we shift the narrative and be a living bridge, or we're doomed to perpetuate the same costly missteps over and over again. One change made anywhere in the system becomes a change everywhere in the system. If you feel compelled to wear your hair short, do it. And if it rocks the boat, so what? Maybe the boat needs to be rocked. But this has to come from your heart. It can't come from anger or rage or an acting out. But by simply living from your truest self. Embrace the courage to live boldly from within the place where you just are you. Dare to be you. Dare to be you. And now, when I'm asked that question, are you a boy or are you a girl? I reply, I'm me. I'm Rachel Dickson. Thank you.